Hi, I'm Sarah Aguilar, co-founder of LIV NRG, and I'm here at the Ancestral Health Symposium with Steph Gaudreau. She is an author, podcaster, and health coach. The reason why I've got Steph on today is because she epitomizes strength, both from the inside and the outside. And as a businesswoman and being quite driven, you know that you kind of push yourself to perfection. Everything has to be right. You've got to be on form performing at work, you've got to be on top of your relationships, and you've got to look perfect at the same time. And God knows what diet you might be following or what strict rules you're following, but in the end you often can end up doing things that detriment your health. Steph has put together an amazing four-core plan that addresses all of these issues so that you can be on top of your game without harming yourself long term, and really kind of nourishing the soul and your body as well, and the mindset to optimize your performance. So we're going to find out first a little bit about your story and how you got to where you are. So tell me a little bit about...
Oh gosh, where do we start? How long is this going to be? It's been a really interesting ride, and I think a lot of the things that I've experienced as a woman are things that many women experience. So in that way, I don't feel like I'm unique at all, but I think that's a strength of mine, is that I can relate to women very well in terms of, you know, being on diets for a really long period of time, years, decades, not thinking that you're good enough, always thinking that you have to earn some kind of perfection, like you said, in order to be worthy. And that was really a huge theme of my life. And a lot of it had to do with me never feeling comfortable in my body and feeling like I always had to be smaller. I had to be smaller to get attention, I had to be smaller to be good enough, I had to be smaller to be worthy, and that set up decades of dieting and dysfunction with food and exercise. And in a society that really, even today, praises, you know, eating less and moving more, for some people they take that to the extreme, and I was one of those people, right, eating less and moving more. And so I think we think about, well, if you're cognizant of what you're eating, that's a good thing. If you're exercising, that's a great thing. But it's really looking at the individual, and are they doing these things from a perspective that's benefiting not just their physical health, but their mental health. So a lot of these things were things that I struggled with, and it really took about 10 years ago, me coming to kind of a breaking point and saying, you know, I'm doing all of this training, I'm really trying to be a good athlete. And in, you know, in hindsight, I wasn't a professional athlete, I just was a recreational athlete who wanted to be the best. And I was really restricting my food intake. I just kept thinking, if I can get smaller and be a specific weight or a specific size, I'm going to be so much better at what I'm doing, and by being better, I'm going to be more worthy of love, attention. I'm going to finally feel good enough. And that didn't happen. So I, about 10 years ago, said, all right, well, I'm going to just try to eat differently. And it was really by suggestion. It was friends of mine who I was racing mountain bikes with, and they said, we're going to do this, you know, this thing where we're eating less processed food, we're going to be eating more fats. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this is so scary. But what do I have to lose? So I, you know, went from eating something that was more of a processed food diet, even though it was kind of, quote, healthy. You know, I was always trying to eat low calorie, low fat, and I kind of changed everything. And I'm a person who, in some ways, can deal with a lot of change at one time. And I always say, you know, I was married at the time, but I had no kids. Like, it was really easy to get buy-in on all that. But I changed that, and then the same year, I gave up endurance athlete training. And so I went from doing triathlons to lifting weights, which was a huge change. Yeah. For the first time in really my life. And as a kid, I did team sports and stuff like that, but it was really in my early 20s that I started to have this really dysfunctional relationship with movement, that I was able to start focusing on what my body could do and not just what it looked like. So those were really two of the biggest things for me, and I think the two most relevant parts of my story. In 2013, I left a 12-year career as a high school science teacher, and I started doing what I'm doing now online, and it started with recipes and sharing that, and eventually morphed into health coaching, and then I became a nutritional therapist and a strength coach. So I teach women online and in books and the things that I do how to start implementing these things in their lives. That's
phenomenal. You went from a low-fat diet to more of a paleo-style diet.
Yes.
And then at the same time dropped chronic cardio and went into weightlifting, because the time you put into cardio and then in terms of how that translates to how you look versus with weightlifting, it's just such a huge difference, and much less the time investment and the gains that you get from that. Not just like, for me, I love weightlifting as well, and I just like feeling strong physically helps me feel strong mentally, like it really does. And I think it's not just psychological, I think you release a lot of hormones as well that literally make you actually stronger mentally, and it's just a few switches can have such a huge change on how you feel. And do you think there's also a relationship with going from low fat to paleo? Do you think that affected your mental health and strength as well?
Well, I definitely had blood sugar problems. And I was always a person, and this went back to being a kid really, and a teenager. My blood sugar would get so low that I would pass out. And this happened to me one of the last times it happened to me, I was teaching, and this was in about 2004. I was thinking, I just need to make it to lunch, it's gonna be great, and I can eat and then I'll feel better. Because when you're in that hypoglycemic state, the best way to relieve how you feel, which is like spacey and heart racing and all these things, is to eat something. And so I just said, I have to take it to lunch and I'll be fine. And literally the last student walked out the door, and I went to take a step and I passed out. And I woke up, came to, and I was on the floor of my classroom, and I was teaching science, and you have those big kind of black lab benches, the tabletops, and I had just missed hitting my head on the side of this table, and I thought, oh my gosh. But it wasn't until another 5 or 6 years that I really changed what I was eating.
Really?
Yeah, so I struggled a lot with reactive hypoglycemia, and really struggled with my blood sugar. And once I really changed what I was eating, a lot of that went away. I improved my gut health significantly. I had a lot of gut problems, random gut problems. I mean, nothing that would be diagnosable or even recognizable, but so much bloating, irregular bowel movements, and just not feeling good when I ate. And you need to eat to survive. So when you don't feel good when you're eating 3 meals a day every day, it's just, you just don't feel good, and it affects, your mental clarity and your mental alertness, and how you feel like you can deal with your day and your fatigue levels, and can you make it to the end of the day feeling like you get to the end of the day, I'm like, all right, I'm tired, I'm ready to turn in. But the crushing fatigue that I had, I would leave school every day and I would go to the 7-Eleven down the street from my school, and I would get Coke Zero and M&Ms because I needed sugar and caffeine to make it through the rest of the day.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so I changed, all of that changed.
So were you also not eating enough at the same time? Yeah.
Yep, underfed, just really relying on sugar and caffeine, and I still drink coffee, and I don't eat a sugar-free diet, but the nutrient value of my kind of baseline diet now is so much different, so much higher than what I was eating. And I was joking earlier that, I used to, I would stop at the Circle K in the morning, and this is around the same time that I passed out. I was also under an incredible amount of stress. I was getting divorced. I would stop, I would get the biggest coffee you could possibly get from the convenience store, and I would get a Metrex protein bar with some kind of crappy protein in it, and just not good nutrition at all. And that was my breakfast. And so no wonder. And then I would and then at night I would drink half a bottle to a bottle of wine. And that was mostly my dinner, along with whatever random other stuff. So I really was not eating well at all.
No, it was just messing with the blood sugars and firing loads of cortisol as well from the coffee.
Oh yeah.
No stability of energy there at all. And then with stress, and it's just, you can't be as resilient if you haven't got the baseline of energy.
No.
Everything just seems more difficult when you're hungry and you're starving your brain and body.
Absolutely. And one of the best quotes I ever heard was that your hormones are the glasses through which you look at the world. And I think that's so true, that when things are really not balanced and things are wildly out of place, yes, like we all have our own innate resilience and ability to deal with those things. But when we are in that state where our hormones are really not regulated very well, again, that's how we see the world. So we see everything as being very stressful, or we see everything as being very hopeless, or we see everything as being, you know, like I can handle what comes my way. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, whether you feel safe or not. And then there's the gut-brain connection.
Yeah, I knew nothing about gut health back then. Yeah, it's absolutely such an area. I think that we're going to keep seeing so much more research coming out about and kind of validating what we already know, right? You know, if we have gut problems, if we are not digesting and assimilating our food, we have gut barrier disruption, that stuff does play into our mental health, our clarity, our immunity, everything. It's so important.
Yeah, because when we have a vagus nerve that connects directly from our gut to our brain. So when you feel like something doesn't feel right, it's literally your gut brain communicating with your head brain that something is wrong, and it's a very real thing. But it comes from protection, looking after ourselves, and it's super innate. And if you've got bacteria that's going wrong down there, then the communication is lost, and a lot of mental health issues can be found, like identified in certain bacteria in people's gut. So there's so much more research to go on with it. It's very new, very, very new. And how quickly did you notice like positive benefits when you went paleo? Was it overnight? Was it the same day, or did it take a while?
I would say like I really consistently started to notice that I was feeling better within a couple months. And really attributing it to, okay, I'm making some changes. And it wasn't just food, right? So I changed what I was doing for activity, and I slowly started to try to sleep more. I mean, I was getting maybe 5 or 6 hours of sleep a night consistently, which is not, now I'm like, give me my sleep, because this is really makes me feel pretty good. So there were lots of little things that I started to change and implement and improve. But I think within probably the first couple months, I started to feel a marked difference in my energy levels and feeling like, you know, I could make it to the end of the day, and I wasn't falling asleep after lunch and trying to keep my eyes open, or in a meeting and, you know, you're like, I'm nodding off, but hopefully nobody sees me. And so yeah, it was pretty, in the grand scheme of things, was pretty fast.
And can you tell me a little bit about your 4 core principles?
Yeah, so the core 4 I really put together because I was looking at what are a lot of the changes that I made in my own life. And I don't think that these 4 things are revolutionary in any way, shape, or form. I mean, if you compare it to what sort of is going on and is still common in the world, it may seem a little bit counterculture, but I think within these communities that we're in, this is not new information. It's really how we then apply that knowledge to things like behavior change and sustainable lifestyle habits, and how we're doing it. So the 4 things are to eat nourishing foods, move with intention, recharge your energy, and empower your mind. So these things look different for every single person, and I'm always really encouraging that people take a look at, you know, yes, these are the frameworks and they're sort of the paths that you can follow, but it's not a strict set of rules, because the strict rules are where we really get into trouble with being able to implement things long-term, to find the sustainability, to give ourselves grace when life blows up and or the kid is sick or the car breaks down and we can't do our normal things that we're used to doing. Can we continue on when the crisis passes? And can we learn how to take care of ourselves on a really baseline level, because we care about ourselves and we know that we deserve that care. It's almost like self-care extended out to these 4 things. It's not just getting a manicure. I'm not that there's anything wrong with that. Like, treating yourself is certainly important, right? And if you can do those things, that's wonderful, but that's not true. Like, true self-care, and in that sense, is making sure that we're well fed, that we're nourished, that we're slept, that we are, have a good mental headspace, and that those things really affect how we feel. And then when we feel a certain way, then we can do certain things in our lives. So, our thinking becomes our feelings, and our feelings become our actions. So how do we impact that in those 4 different areas?
Yeah, the mindset's so important, isn't it? Because thoughts do become things, and the way that we talk to ourselves in that language will manifest in how things turn out. And often for driven people, you are beating yourself up a lot of the time, and it's just changing the language that you use for yourself and speaking to yourself like you're a best friend, not an enemy, which is unfortunately so much what we do. You've got to really think, is that how I'm speaking to myself like right now? Would I speak to a friend like that? It's tough because you've got to change all of those areas. But with nutrition, because that's the first pillar, do you promote a specific diet, or is it just some guidelines within that you would? Yeah. What would you say?
Yeah, and I think so. Here's the tricky part: is being someone who's a nutrition professional. Oftentimes, people want you to take sides, right? They want you to come out with a clear stance of like, this is the right way to do it, or this is the wrong way to do it. And I think it's way more complicated than that. But we know that some things are really important. So on the most basic level, can we prioritize real, whole, nutrient-dense foods? I mean, this is not rocket science. There is certainly a place for fun foods, and you don't need to eat perfectly to have improved health and see a benefit. But real, whole, nutrient-dense foods, I mean, can we fill our plates with at least half vegetables? I feel like we can all agree on that, no matter what side of the aisle we're on with, like, this is the right thing, or you should be doing more of this or less of that. So, real, whole, nutrient-dense foods, lots of plants, lots of fiber, really important for our gut, and so many other things. Are we getting adequate protein? Are we really incorporating those nutritious fats so that we have a benefit for fat-soluble vitamins? And I mean, they're just brain health, like there's so many things to think about. So I think if we can try to establish those things as a strong base, but then let people experiment and play around and say, actually, how did these foods make me feel? Hey, every time I eat a banana, I don't feel so good. Why might that be? Okay, what else is related to my gut health? And so you can kind of dive down the rabbit hole, I feel like, later on. But the reality is that most people who are struggling and who are not feeling good are really not eating, even at the most basic level, what we would want them, we would really want to see them doing so that they would feel so much better. And you kind of have to realize that most people, unlike myself, I went and took a trash bag and cleaned out my pantry and cleaned out my fridge, and I did that in one day because I just said I want to just start again, just clean slate. Most people aren't like that. You have a family. How are you going to get all of them on board?
Yeah, they want to do it bit by bit.
Yeah.
I think it's easier to just get rid of the crap that's all addictive, doesn't make you feel good, and get rid of temptation, because it's just so hard.
So it can certainly, some people do really well with baby steps. Some people want to clean everything out ahead of time. And then, there is also this sort of mental layer that goes into it. So we talked about the how are you eating? Are you eating when you're constantly rushed, constantly stressed? You're not digesting your food properly. You could potentially be setting your gut up for further dysfunction. You might need some extra TLC for your gut. I mean, if you've been kind of hammering it for a while and you're not that very delicate membrane, and I tell people your gut membrane is like the thickness of your eyelid. It's so delicate. And we need to treat that really well. And if you need some gut repair, sure, that's really important to think about. Or if you don't have enough stomach acid because you're chronically stressed, or if you have Hashimoto's or whatever, how are we going to help you on a therapeutic level? But again, that's kind of the next layer of the conversation. So we really want to make sure we have good gut health. We're slowing down when we can. I mean, start with 1 meal a day. I know this is hard, but can you try to practice it? take some deep breaths, right? You talked about the vagus nerve, activate that parasympathetic nervous system so you can really rest and digest. When you're in that sympathetic state, you're in fight or flight mode. Even if there's not a bear chasing you, it's just your jerk-faced boss who's giving you a hard time, right? So can we slow down? Can we chew more? The how? And then there is that mental sort of like that relationship with food. A lot of people, when they are approaching nutrition, do approach it from a very all or nothing point of view. And having rigid rules does work for some people. Because they're like, it just helps me keep the temptation away, it's great. If I kind of go off plan or I go off track, it's cool. I just get back to it when I can. That happens. Other people, that is not the case. And thus starts the cycle of sort of all or nothing eating, can lead to loss of control eating. It can just set up a really difficult relationship where people have problems coping when the rigidity of their food is challenged or isn't there. So food is very complex. It's also cultural, right? It's celebratory, it's social. And so I do try to bring some of those things into the conversation. And should you hopefully enjoy what you're eating, that even if it's healthy, yeah, if you hate everything you put on your plate, you're not going to be able to digest that quite the same way. So experimentation, helping people learn how to cook, it's all really important. It all goes into that.
Yeah, it's incredible that they link so much to mindfulness as well, mindful eating.
Yes.
And the thing about the all or nothing is that's so common amongst the business people and highly driven people, is they are all or nothing. So they're like, I'm going to eat this way, but when I'm cheating, I'm just going to go all out and then potentially destroy all the good work that you've done. And it's that black and white rigidity that then you feel shame and guilt or bad because you binged on something you're not supposed to eat, and then you judge yourself and all the harshness comes out, and they think that, that's just it. It's addressing that mindset, and then that will help you make better decisions about how you're eating rather than what you're eating.
Yeah.
Because the how is often more important than the what. Yeah, it's tough because I know as well, because you are so like, gotta do it perfect, and then you feel like you failed sometimes, and that failure feeling is just...
Yeah, it's overwhelming, and I am a recovering perfectionist. I didn't tell you this in the earlier part of the conversation. I completely understand where people are coming from when they are like, the rigidity helps me stay on my path, and I'm like, great, well, again, what happens when that's messed up though, and you don't have that control? And I struggled with that for a long time, because I would do the same thing, like, I'm gonna get back to it on Monday. I messed it up, I need to start again. And I would always create this, well, you need to wait until the beginning of the next week. There was always like this symbolic thing about Monday, right? And so when everybody starts again, and I kept thinking later on, well, why can't I just start at the next meal? Why does it have to be this big thing that I have to then come back to this place of like, okay, I'm gonna steal my resolve, and like, I'm gonna do it again this time. And I think as a health coach and as a nutritional therapist, can I really help people find more acceptance for what's going on? And again, realize that if the rules that I've set for myself are causing me more harm than they are good, like you said, the like sort of like cheat / binge day, because that can significantly set you back in terms of how you feel. Nobody feels good after like an all out, like you completely lost control. And can you, introduce a small piece of chocolate today, right now? Could you, like, I could totally eat cake right now, fine, no big deal. Not everybody can get to that point right away though, and so some of it is unlearning those very rigid ways of approaching food. And then there are things like you have to honor in terms of nutrition. If you have celiac disease, once you find out and you know that avoiding gluten is literally the only thing that's going to help you manage your condition, really, like it's the presence or absence of gluten that causes you to be sick or not, then you know that avoiding gluten is like a non-negotiable. Or if you have an allergy to a certain food, you have a peanut allergy, you're not going to just dance with that, you know, okay, cool, like I'll have a little bit of peanuts now and then. Obviously, like there are certain things you have to respect. Starting to learn your body and what makes you feel good and what doesn't make you feel good. And there is an intuitive part of that process. And for some people, learning to do intuitive eating is very important. Mindful eating, very important. Intentional eating, very important. And it really comes down to the person, the individual, their history, what food's been like in their life, and how you can help them tease some of that stuff apart, because stressing out about food and eating well is completely, this is just like so counterproductive.
It is, it's almost like an oxymoron, because it's like, if you're going to be releasing all that cortisol, stressing about eating healthy foods, and you're just undoing any of the good that you could potentially be doing. And you can put that energy into food as well. But with the intuitive eating, it is, if you eat something and it makes you feel bad, or it gives you a headache, or you can't concentrate, or anything like that, don't eat it. But the problem with so many processed foods is if they come with stimulants and like caffeine or sugar, it temporarily masks the bad feeling, and you don't notice it till later, and you don't always correlate, you don't notice the relationship between that food and how you're feeling. But that is something people definitely need to do more of. Just experiment, because there's no one diet that's for everyone. It's just, there's a baseline, which is definitely we need healthy high fat, and we need animal products and plants. There's no one diet for anyone, because a lot of people will be like, okay, so if I do that diet, then I'm sorted and that's it. But actually it's like, there's no one, everyone's different. Everyone has a different diet for that time in their life as well, because we're constantly changing, and depending on how old you are, where you live, the season, your ancestors, everything. It's not one strict protocol. And if you're strict about that and stressing out about it, it's not going to benefit you. You're better off just relaxing a bit and eating what you want, to a degree, of course. But yeah, nutrition is a tricky subject. It's just, you've got to, I mean, I think the future of nutrition is so personalised. And medicine as well, hopefully. One day we'll get there.
Agreed.
For sure. And then movement. What do you have to say on that? Because so many women do a lot of cardio, and you see people in the gym doing cardio, and like, no, cardio is great. Like low level exercise and keeping moving all day, fantastic. But then pushing yourself into the parasympathetic too much, doing way too much chronic cardio, is like, that's not where you want to be.
Yeah, I think, you know, my friend Jamie best described it as something very simple, and when it comes to cardio, and it comes down to something like this: move slowly, often, move quickly, occasionally. It's like very, it's like a very, in a nutshell, like it's very, if we sort of think about a pyramid, the way most people view fitness and exercise is that the base has to be, well, okay, some people think about this in one of two ways. They think either, you know, they have to just do chronic cardio all the time, or they think that if they do get the weightlifting or sort of like high intensity bug, because they're like, okay, high intensity workouts, really good, really beneficial, that has to be the base of the pyramid all the time too. And so it depends on kind of what world you're steeped in, but I've seen it go both ways, where from a more traditional background, people think, okay, so my movement's gonna be only just cardio all the time. Now, caveat, that might be appropriate for someone if they are, you know, their adrenals are really shot, or if their autoimmunity is really flaring, or if they just had a baby. So it's very contextual, right? However, if you're kind of in general good health, you need to think about some resistance training a couple times a week, 2 to 3, not 6 or 7, twice a day. And again, what competitors and athletes do is not A, what everybody else should be doing, and B, not necessarily health promoting. but we see and aspire to. We see professional athletes, and no wonder they are the best at what they do in the world. Watch the Olympics. I mean, poetry in motion. These are professionals, right? They might not be making money at what they're doing, but they're training to the level of a professional, and therefore, in many cases, are trading overall health for performance. We have to understand, I'm a normal person, we have to understand that as normal people, we don't need to aspire to the level of movement of an Olympic athlete to find benefit. So 2 to 3 times a week strength training, move a lot in that low-key zone, a little bit of HIIT if it's appropriate for you, so some intervals, some sprinting, but again, that's powerful medicine. And you don't need that kind of powerful medicine every day, day after day, multiple times a day. What's your stress load like in other places in your life, right? And the fact is that yes, it could be a hormetic stressor, which means I experience a little bit of it. I lift a weight, I perhaps even have some damage to my tissue on a micro level. My tissue repairs, I get stronger. Great. Fantastic.
And that's exactly what you want.
Yes.
But if you do that too much, then you're just breaking down.
Or if you're just, the idea of like exercise, this is stressor. If you have a lot of psychological stress in your life, financial stress in your life, relationship stress in your life, career stress in your life, stress from illness in your life, all of that compounds. So you need to be smart about that stuff. On the strength training point of view, I know a lot of women are kind of scared about it, and they think, well, I'm gonna get hurt, or it's gonna make me bulky, and I'm gonna look like a guy. But the thing is, ladies, you need to know that this is very efficient. So if you're busy, you're actually gonna get more bang for your buck by lifting some weights a couple times a week. Because if let's say you're gonna do 5 sets of 5 lunges, as an example, when you get stronger, all you have to do is pick up heavier weights and do 5 sets of 5 lunges, and you will continue to get benefit from that. If you become more cardiovascularly efficient, let's say you're a runner, I used to be a runner, used to run half marathons and marathons, the way to get more cardiovascularly fit in that traditional sense is to go longer and longer and longer, and when you're busy,
you don't have time.
You don't have time, right? So can you introduce some strength training for efficiency's sake, but also once we're about age 30, we start losing muscle mass. And every decade, we're losing a certain percentage of muscle mass. So in order to prevent that loss, we want to introduce some kind of resistance training. It doesn't need to be scary. You're not necessarily going to be like a power lifter, although if you like that, that's great too. But we are going to get that benefit, the metabolic benefit, because muscle is like an endocrine organ. It's capable, the hormones that we get are capable of affecting tissue other places in our body, like adipose tissue. So if we want to have that metabolic benefit, we need to do some resistance training. We're not going to get that metabolic benefit from cardio. So that's that. Bone density, hugely important. So we're going to get a benefit from that. There is now lots of more research coming out about how that resistance training benefits women in perimenopause and menopause, because we're all getting older. It's eventually going to happen to all of us. And historically, or sort of like in general, the thing that a lot of women in that age group battle is weight gain, or not feeling good, fatigue, inability to sleep, so on and so forth. So if we want to get all of these benefits, it's really just a couple times a week can make such a huge difference. But sometimes you need to find, I don't know, a coach, a trainer, a gym, some kind of program.
Sessions to learn at the beginning and have that system and set up. But you say you get so much more out of your time investment if you're weightlifting than if you're doing cardio. And you feel stronger on both the inside and the outside. It's just, it makes you feel solid. And from that, from strength training and exercise, moving on to really getting all the benefits from them, you need to prioritize recovery. So how have you changed your sleep?
Oh, well, I sleep more. I think one of the biggest things for people is they feel like when we're adults, when you're a kid, you think, oh, I've got to follow my parents' rules. you're a teenager, you just dream of the day when you're independent, you can do what you want. And so then we become adults. And we forget that when we're kids, we have a sleep schedule, we have a routine. And when we're adults, we're like, I don't need to do that. I'm an adult. I can do whatever I want. Well, there's really, if there's an interesting thing that happens is that when we do not have a consistent sleep and wake time, it becomes harder to match up to our circadian rhythm. And circadian rhythm is our internal clock. It is hugely important for our health. This is one of the reasons why shift workers really struggle with their health. Can't always get away from shift work, but it's really important that you do shift work, you do what you can to mitigate that. So circadian rhythm, very, very important. Sleep is part of helping regulate circadian rhythm. So one of the best things you can do as an adult, and this is one of the things that I did, was just get on a schedule. Occasionally I stay up late and I pay for it the next day because I feel like absolute rubbish. So all that aside, I think one of the best things you can do is start going to bed at a consistent time. Some of this just takes sucking it up and discipline. And if you're somebody who's just mindlessly scrolling social media, then you need to set yourself an alarm and say, once this alarm goes off, I'm done for the night. I'm not scrolling social media in my bed. I park my phone outside the bedroom. There's so many things that I started doing that are, some of them take a little bit of discipline and a little bit of habit change. Other things are really easy. You do it once and you're done. You install your night shift on your phone, your flux on your computer, you set it, and it does the work for you. So it dims your screen, right? You buy your amber glasses once, you put them on when the sun starts going down in wherever you live. This is not hard. You buy them once, you put them on, easy. That's hardly asking very much.
Blue light blockers, right?
The blue light glasses, right? So there are certain things you can do. You're gonna buy yourself a set of blackout curtains. You install them once, it's done. So those are some of the things that I have done to improve the sleep. But I think for people listening to this, it's very interesting that that pillar is about recharging your energy. We sleep hopefully a third of the day, but what are we doing in the other 16 hours with our time? And I think if you do work in a really high stress environment, if you are a really driven person, you're in business, you're an entrepreneur, you are just a real go-getter, you need to take a look at how efficient your workflow is when you're working, because that can really make you feel super drained. So I'm talking about everything from continual multitasking, and I know everybody hates to hear this. There's so much research about why multitasking is so inefficient, and this takes practice, but one of the things that I've done, there's sort of like the Pomodoro method of work. I use a modified sort of 90-30, which I'll work for, sometimes it's 3 30-minute chunks, there's my 90, and then I take a 30-minute break. Now you can't always do that in your work environment, but what you can do is when you do get your break, think about what you're doing on your break. If you work in a very, you're a creator, you're on the computer, you're working in a very sort of thought-driven, mentally draining environment, you work in an office, you're a CEO, all that stuff, if you're gonna take your break and scroll email, you are not recharging. So pick something else. And this is so hard because some of it's workplace culture as well, which is super dysfunctional in a lot of cases. If you are somebody who has a really physical job, you are on your feet, you're a nurse, you're a teacher, you are in the military, whatever it is, you're just go, go, go all the time. When you have your break, you need to switch the channel and do something that's calming. Because what a lot of people do is they're like, I'm just gonna go do a workout, and they're so tired. They get super tired. Now some of that is they get a little bit of a false boost, right? They get their cortisol bump from their workout, and they're like, I feel so much better, and then they crash. And they're like, I feel so much worse later on. So some of it is just learning how to do things a little bit smarter so that you feel better. Now it's really interesting because a lot of the Scandinavian countries know that this is true. They know that if you're trying to work 8 solid hours or 9 solid hours straight through the day, what happens to your productivity? Your productivity
completely falls.
You're not doing anything. You're at work, but you're not present.
Producing anything.
You're not present. You're not making anything. You're just dawdling around the internet. You're like getting up to go visit your cube mate. You're, faffing around on email. Like, you're not being productive. And so what they've done is they've cut the work day. So they work fewer hours, but they get as much done. So what I do is that 90-30. Obviously, I work from home. I can make my own schedule, but I set the time, I take a break. I set the time, I take a break. I get more done in 4.5 hours that way than I do 8 hours or 10 hours of just like kind of mindlessly doing my thing, because I get tired. We can't focus. After an hour or two, we need a break.
Yeah, and you've got to focus on the times that you're the most productive as well.
Yes.
And be absolutely disciplined. It's like, be as disciplined about going to bed at a certain time as you are getting up. And be disciplined about how you use your time, because you can be more productive. Because I did that too. And I've been doing the Pomodoro technique, and it's like, oh my God, I can do so much in 4 hours in the morning. And then around lunchtime, it's like, this is workout time. And it's also when your body temperature is the highest, you're more primed for working out. And then I might go back later. And that's great when you are kind of working on your own. You can do that. Obviously, if you're in an office, it's like, get up and move around on your breaks, get headspace. Don't be stuck at the screen with everyone else. There's so many things you can implement. And lastly, I want to talk to you about the mindset and thoughts. What you have to say on that.
Gosh, such a big topic, and it's really one of the things that I think is the hardest. It's the hardest to pin down. It's the scariest often to wade into our minds and think about like our own thoughts and have awareness of our own thoughts and confront our limiting beliefs and work on that stuff. And it really does take time. It's a process. It's not often something you can just go out and buy your amber glasses and you're done, right? It's not a one and done type thing. It is a practice, and oftentimes it is a sort of like figuring out why we are the way we are. And that could mean getting therapy or getting professional counseling or professional coaching. So there is that aspect of it, but there are a lot of things I think people can access right now that are less scary. So for example, sitting down and looking at your values. What matters to you? And a lot of the reason why people feel so disenchanted with their lives, or they feel so frustrated with things, is because the things that are important to them don't match the things that they're spending their time doing. There's a disconnect. And yes, we have to be adults, right? We have to adult all the time, and we do things we don't like pay taxes and all that stuff. But there are a lot of sort of optional things that we spend our time doing that aren't matching up where our values are. And so I think that's a really easy thing that people can do, is just sit down and take a look at that stuff. How do we build, I'm not one for sort of like positive mantras. I think that affirmations and stuff can work for some people. For other people, if you're like, I love myself, and you're thinking, oh my God, I'm so far away from that. That's such utter absolute crap. That's completely false. So if affirmations and things like that don't work for you, and they tend to be something you ignore or you can't engage with, I really recommend people come to some kind of gratitude practice, because there's so much research on how powerful this is, number one. Number two, it helps you stop obsessing about yourself for 5 minutes and really challenges you to think about what in your life matters to you. What are you truly grateful for? And I mean like a deep sense of appreciation and joy, not like, wow, I won a trip to Italy. That was really exciting. I'm super grateful for that. And that's wonderful. But it is what I challenge my clients to do, and the people I work with in my community, is I want you to get the most mundane about your gratitude as you possibly can. So somebody asked me once, what would you say, like, what are you grateful for right now? And I was sitting by my open window, and I said, you know what, right now, I can feel the breeze on my face. I'm so grateful for that, because that reminds me that I'm alive and I'm here right now. Or the way, the first sip of coffee and how it tastes, it's so fast. Or just, you know, somebody held the door for me today and looked me in the eye and said, I like your dress, or whatever it is. But I really think gratitude is so very, very powerful. And that's the piece of that sort of mindset is when we're only ever inward focused, and sometimes that's necessary because we got to put our own oxygen mask on first, but when we're only ever thinking about ourselves and worrying about ourselves and focused on ourselves, we forget that there's so much more to connection and being in community and being with the people that we love and relationships that really give back to us, and that's an important piece of the dynamic too. It's a push-pull all the time. If we're only ever giving to other people and we're not taking care of ourselves, that's not good. But if we're only ever focused on ourselves, that's not healthy either. There needs to be that sort of back and forth. So, and then on like the negative thoughts piece, awareness is like the first step, and a lot of this comes out of Buddhist tradition. That is just, can I just be an observer of my own thinking? Because I think what people don't realize is how crappy they are to themselves when they talk to themselves. And our thoughts become our feelings, and our feelings become our behaviors and our reality. And when we're talking so negatively to ourselves all the time and beating ourselves up, we think that that's motivating, but in the long term, it's not. It's hard to change things, right? It's hard. We default to what we're comfortable with because the alternative, which is change, is even scarier. And a lot of that self-talk may go back to childhood. It may go back to painful things. It may go back to a time of trauma. Like, it's not always clean and easy to just figure out why we say the things that we say to ourselves. And there's some really interesting psychological phenomena of how that gets deeply embedded in who we are, and how it gets reinforced and how it becomes how we see the world. All that being said, I think the very first step is to be an observer. Can you be that outside observer of your thinking, and also realize that you don't have to take action on every thought that you have, because your thoughts aren't you. So if I have a thought of like, oh, you know, I bet that she's thinking this thing about me and she probably doesn't like me, and oh, now it's gonna be awkward, and you know, we're gonna need to end this conversation in a different way. I mean, I'm all of a sudden I'm starting to fall down this rabbit hole of the things I'm gonna do, because I thought for a second that maybe, you know, you had a thought, like you looked at me weird, and I tell this to people all the time. They'll say, I saw this person and they gave me a look, and I was like, maybe they have gas. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they had a really bad day, or they stubbed their toe. Maybe it has nothing to do with you, and you just made up that whole story about that exchange of look, and now you're gonna feel some kind of way about it, and now you're gonna either harbor on it, you're going to mentally beat yourself up for the interaction, you're gonna, who knows, you could think, she probably thought I looked fat. So what are you gonna do? I'm gonna go start that diet tomorrow. Now you've just taken an action on the thought that you had that probably wasn't even true. So I think that there's a lot of work you can do in this area. It goes so deep and so wide, but like, just start observing your thinking. And
yeah, training the mind. And I think that's why meditation is so important. It's just that stepping back and realizing you aren't your thoughts. You can watch them and they can go by. Yep. And yeah, training the mind is just so important for that, because you don't get pulled into that small thinking, and again being back to fight or flight instantly, just because you've misinterpreted something or something didn't go the way that you planned. You've covered off everything. Like, that is phenomenal. I think going from looking at what you're eating, intuitive eating, paying attention to how you feel when you eat food, and just following a bit paleo kind of to start with just good food for you that's nourishing. Then to movement, I mean weightlifting of course, because you get so much reward for the time that you put in compared to cardio. And focusing on recovery, making sure you've got that sleep hygiene, preparing for bed, getting good quality sleep, and then having a lot more energy throughout the day, and you can even make decisions better. Finally, to the mind, the hardest the hardest thing to manage when you're busy and when you run a business, an entrepreneur in your life, the hardest thing is always the mind. And cultivating a practice of meditation or just mindfulness or just sitting back and realizing that you're separate to your thoughts. Because that was a brilliant example of how things spiral out of control, and that would give you a foundation for being so much stronger, both physically and mentally, and just applying a few small changes. There's so many of them. I mean, that is, yeah, I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with me and our audience too. How can people find you and follow you to keep updated on what you're doing?
Yeah, it's super easy. Just go to stephgaudreau.com. You can find links to the podcasts, to the book, all my social media. It's all right there.
We'll link that down in the show notes too. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking out so much time for this. And definitely want to keep in touch. Love learning from you. Thanks.